everyone. My name is Trisha Bartles. I'll introduce myself in just a second, but welcome to the Nature's Playground, Unveiling the Wonders of the Great Canadian Rockies webinar. So just wanted to go over some things first. Let's do introductions. So my name is Trisha Bartles. I'm a program manager here with Adventures in Good Company. I also occasionally guide, so you might have seen me on some trips. And I'd also like to introduce Karen Cott. Karen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Karen. I have been with Adventures in Good Company since 2016. I have worked in the office as well as a program manager. So some of you may have talked to me on the phone or exchanged emails before. I quit working in the office in November of last year, and that's giving me more time to guide awesome trips like this one. So if you are traveling to the Canadian Rockies, I would look forward to meeting you there.
Karen is actually guiding next week for our 2023 departure of the Canadian Rockies too, so she's suiting up for that. This is fresh in her mind. So just a couple of housekeeping things. Just want to point out some of the functionality of the way this webinar is going to work. So in the bottom right corner, you'll see a little, looks like a chat box icon. You can use that throughout the webinar to chat any questions that you have, and then at the end of the webinar, Karen and I will answer those for you. And then just an agenda of where we're headed. So we're going to talk a little bit about Canada itself, where the trip is going to be going, and a little map regarding that. And then we'll go over the logistics of the trip, the lodging, the accommodations, the activities, and then we'll go over that Q&A portion at the end. So let's get started. So this is a bunch of fun facts about Canada, but Canada is a really awesome place. So to start off, there's 10% of the world's forest in Canada. And if you haven't noticed, there's been a lot of forest fires, unfortunately, but they do have a lot of forest, which is great. They have the 400 million hectares of forest, which is an interesting way to describe it, but a lot. So Canada has also the longest highway in the world. I know a lot of people might not know that, but the Trans-Canada Highway, which goes, I believe it's west to east, is 7,821 kilometers. So very, very long. And then I think this is just a fun fact that I also wanted to find out, but how many Canadians speak French? They have a population of 35 million people, and 22.8% of them, primarily on the eastern side, would speak French. And then how many national parks does Canada have? They have 38 national parks, 10 national park reserves, and 1 urban national park too. So which is really cool. They have a lot of space to play, which is why it's a great place to visit. And there's that little map of that. I know you can't see in detail all of them, but all those little red maple leaves, which is so appropriate for Canada, point out those different versions of those national parks. And then also, this is just to point out, I know this map can be a little bit confusing, but I just wanted to point out more on a zoomed scale of where we're going to be headed. So as you can see in the middle, there's Banff. Let's see if you can look at my mouse here. Banff National Park, Yoho, and then we've got Kootenay down here as well. So these are the primarily national parks we're going to be traveling through, and Jasper is also up here to point out as well. All right. And then this is just to kind of show you where we're going to be headed. So the trip starts in Calgary. So that's here on the eastern side. Then we're going to head into Banff National Park, make our way to that hostel. And then it's going to traverse through those other national parks here, Lake Louise, Banff itself, and Banff, the city of town of Banff, and then we'll make our way back to Calgary. I'll go over this in a little more detail in just a moment. And Karen, did you have any perspective on the locations as well?
I do. So what is interesting about Canada compared to the United States is that a vast majority of the people live in larger cities, mostly within 100 miles of the United States, but you don't have a lot of like really spread out smaller cities. And our hostel is kind of tucked away near a campground between Lake Louise and the city of Banff, which makes it a lovely isolated little place that is quicker drives to get to the trailheads. And we're going to see some of the classic areas in this region, Lake Louise and Moraine Lake and other things. And so this tucked right in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, you're going to see that we will be surrounded many times by glaciers and mountains, and the hostel where we will be staying is tucked right in the middle of all of that. So this is just a wonderful location for this trip. Absolutely. Both the hostel and the area in general.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Karen. So to talk a little bit about the lodging and the dining and how that's going to kind of work. So first and last nights of the trip, we're going to spend right outside Calgary by the airport at the Hampton Inn. So it's your classic hotel that we're pretty used to with the beds, the normal accommodations, the continental breakfast in the morning. And then the next day we'll move to our lovely hostel that Karen has been talking about. So I have some pictures here on the right, as you can see. This is the communal area, which is really great because they have that wood burning stove and they have it stoking for us a lot of the time. So a lot of the participants love to gather here to have conversation, to bring their drinks, sometimes even eat snacks, you know, that sort of thing. But it's just a great gathering space for everybody to hang out. And the bottom left here, it's on the right side, but the bottom left of the pictures is what it looks like on the outside as well. So you can get an idea of how wooded and remote and great it is. Also to point out, there's a lovely little creek nearby with like a little fire pit outside and some Adirondack chairs. So if you'd like to spend some time outside and just sit by nature and listen to the sounds of the stream in your downtime, it's really lovely. And then on the bottom right there, that's kind of what the situation we have for accommodations. So it's those bunk beds. Good thing to say is that no one is on a top bunk and there's plenty of storage. So you can use the top for your extra storage, laying out your gear, or, you know, just getting situated. And then there's that bottom storage area as well. So there's plenty of room for everybody to have the space they need. And it's really great, like as Karen mentioned, because it's got that communal feel. So it's different than our other trips in the sense that we get to be around everybody at all times. We get to build a little bit more community. Instead of just going back to your hotel room at the end of the day, you get to hang out with everyone. You get to see the guides cook. You get to be a part of the whole communal process. And then to talk about dining a little bit, so we have 2 restaurants. So there's one at the beginning for the welcome dinner and one for the final dinner. And then everything else in between is cooked by the guides. I personally guided this trip with Karen last year, and Karen is very great at her meals. She makes a mean dessert. So there's always enough food, never not enough. And you'll have plenty to choose from, and you'll get that, you know, kind of hanging out in the kitchen feel. Karen, anything you'd like to add?
Just that's a great picture of the bunk room. There's 2 bunk rooms in there. One is laid out really open like this. The other one, the bunks are kind of spread out differently in the room, creating little nooks of privacy. So one feels more open and is easier to get in and out of. The other one has more privacy. Both of them have bathrooms. One is right in the hostel room. The other is adjacent to it. Each of the bathrooms has 2 shower stalls, 2 toilet stalls, 2 sinks. And some of the women said, hey, it's like being back in summer camp with all the adults, and it's a lot of fun. So do be ready for a lot of communal time, but it is nice and clean and open. And the kitchen just has 2 great big dining tables in it that we gather around when it's time to eat. And it really is a nice place to hang out in the evening.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one more thing to add, if you are more on the introverted side, which we have had participants, if you're just like, hey, I just need some time to myself, there's plenty of options to head back to your bunk and read, or like I said, go down to that creek. So if you need like that downtime as well, there's totally options to serve those social needs. Awesome. Jumping a little ahead. So activities. So there's some fun photos on the right there. I want to point out that this is obviously a hiking trip. So we've got a lot of hiking as one of the main focuses. So the hikes can range from anywhere from 5.5 to 11 miles. A lot of the hikes are out and back, and the elevation gain starts at 1,000 feet and then goes up to 2,400. I should say as well that they're built into so that you can acclimate. So we start with the shorter, lower hikes, and then we slowly build to the harder hikes as well, so that you can get your muscles oriented, get used to being at elevation if you're not used to that, and also just used to the area, right? Other great features of this trip that are very unique is a guided glacier walk, which is when you get to go on the glacier itself with a local guide and find out all of the history of that glacier. You also get to see markers of where it's recessed, but it's a really unique experience because it's also surrounded in this bowl of mountains. It's a great activity that we don't offer on any of our other trips. Another great activity day is the Emerald Lake Day. So you get the option to either go on the hike that we have planned in the itinerary, or you can schedule like a kayak, or just hang out by the lake yourself and do, some reading. So there's a lot of options on that day to be more of a rest day if you'd like. Other things to point out, in the picture here, we have the tea house. And this is one of the Lake Louise tea houses, but it's great because you get to go up there and get like a little baked good and some tea. And it's just nice when you're coming back from that hike to have that little warming moment and just hang out in the atmosphere of the national park. And then on the bottom there, I have those two other activities pointed out, but it's the glacier walk. So you get to see how lovely and blue that glacier is. And then the Emerald Lake Day is on the bottom right there. Karen, anything you'd like to add?
Well, so a couple of things. The thing that makes that tea house so special is there's no road that leads up to it. That's just a tea house that Lake Louise has two tea houses. This is the one that's the Plain of Six Glaciers tea house. And so what's kind of fun to see is they have little cottages behind it. And that's because the people who work there actually go in and stay for about 3-day shift because you're hiking clear in there and then out again. And that's what makes it so unique and special is they have to hike in all of the ingredients and everything to get to that tea house. But then they have home baked goods, and you won't find any kind of iced drinks, but it's a lovely experience. And the other thing I would like to say is that when we talk about the hiking and the elevation gains, just be aware that the elevation in the Canadian Rockies is pretty steep. So when we do have elevation gain, it's a pretty steep gain. And when we come down, it's a pretty steep down. And there is one area one day where you're kind of on a steep slope. And so being aware of any vertigo or issues like that is something you might want to be aware of. But it's you are surrounded by beautiful glaciers much of the week, and it is just amazing. It's an experience I absolutely love.
Absolutely. And another thing to add is every hike is so different. So you get to experience so much of the different biomes of the area. So sometimes we're above the tree line and we've got that nice like panoramic view. There's waterfalls, there's an alpine forest, you're on a glacier. You get a little taste of everything that part of Canada has to offer. And I think it is truly magical because you're like, does it get better? And then you go on the next hike and it's like, yeah, it gets better.
And the Emerald Lake Day, even though that's a shorter day, it's a completely different biome in and of itself. If you go into the Emerald Basin, it's a very small valley, and because it's protected there, you get different plants than we've seen anywhere else, and it's much more representative of like the coastal plants in the British Columbia area along the Pacific. So it's a little bit of everything.
Absolutely. Awesome. So Karen kind of touched on this a little bit regarding the terrain and the hiking and the elevation, but this is placed as a level 4 trip. And here's the description of that. I know it's pretty long, but basically it's saying that the terrain can vary. It goes up and down. We're hiking 8 to 11 miles a day. It just kind of exemplifies that it can be a little bit harder of a trip, and there is some conditioning that is required prior to this trip. I also would like to point out that AGC has a partner named Becky Rupp at Trailblazer Wellness, as you can see on the bottom here, and she can help you train for specifically this trip as well. If you'd like to get in touch with her, I'll have my email in just a moment, so you can reach out to me and I can connect you with her as well. But she's a great resource to get people acclimated and trained for certain trips. And
the picture here is exactly the hike that I was talking about, where pictures never really give the best perspective of depth, but that is a pretty steep hillside, and that's where we go up to the day we cross over the summit and hike down the other side. And in July, there might actually still be some snowpack on there, and we go through a little snowpack as we're crossing that area. And the Canadian guides are amazing, and they give us the techniques that we need to know how to traverse through snowpacks and do it safely. Going down the other side from this summit, there's a lot of talus, which is kind of small to medium-sized rocks, and you'll look down that thing and you'll say, there is not a trail there. I'll be dang, how are we getting down the side of this mountain? But we just follow in line, and there actually is a bit of a trail, but we're climbing over a lot of like medium to small sized rocks. And there's also techniques for doing that all of the guides will be helping everyone with. And so it is something that if you come in well prepared, you'll have a better time. And many people on this hike is a little bit of the more challenging hike, but a lot of people said it was their very favorite hike of the entire trip, and you feel challenged and rewarded, and it's an amazing hike. So
it adds to that adventure aspect, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Awesome. So I wanted to point out a couple different quotes for you to read here about some of our participants that were on the trip last year in September. And this is a picture of them as well, doing their little wave. But I wanted to point out what we have available and online now for Canadian Rockies. So we have a July date and a September date for next year. We have 10 spaces available currently on the July date with 2 single supplements just for that first and last night. Because obviously in the hostel, we can't accommodate a single supplement, but you can still have that on the first and last night. And then the September trip, we have 11 spaces available with 1 single supplement. Something to point out about these dates too is they're both great. There isn't a difference in the itinerary. There's just a difference in the temperature and the climate of that particular time. So in July, you've got that more summer feel, you've got the sunshine, it's a little warmer. And then in September, we could have the potential for fall colors, cooler temperatures in the morning with warming up in the afternoon. So each is lovely in their own right. It's just a matter of what you're looking for different dates. I would say if you're on the fence or you're just looking for space in one of these trips, either would be great. Karen, do you have any thoughts on the differences in date as well?
And so people who are sensitive to heat, the July trip is certainly warmer. And also to let you know, there is the potential for some mosquitoes, more so than in the fall, but you have those long days. And so there's no sense of rush in it. You have those long, especially as far north as we are, you get those lovely long days. And then in the fall, it is crispier hiking. If you like cooler hiking, the days are shorter. So it's getting dark at night and it's a little bit darker in the morning. So it's kind of a personal preference. As Tricia said, both are spectacular in and of their own right. They both have great pluses to them. So whatever fits your schedule the best is probably a good option.
Absolutely. And then this is just what I wanted to point out as an awesome slideshow, just to show you like the diversity, some of the places you'll see. There's a variance in all of these different hikes as well. But at the bottom there, I also wanted to point out on the bottom right, the communal feel. I know sometimes the hostel can be the intimidating part, but everybody by the end of it are like best buds. So as you can see, this was the last night on our trip last year, and there's people in PJs just lounging around, hanging, reminiscing, and kind of building those relationships. And that's what AGC is about, right? So we're building connections, making great experiences in really awesome places, connecting with nature. So just wanted to show you the diversity of this, but also like what it's about. Wanted to point out our next webinar, which is paddling with manatees featuring Lori Priest. That's going to be next month at August 3rd at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. And this is a picture from that trip as well. So if you're curious about any of our paddling trips or paddling with manatees in particular, this would be a good one to attend. And then I wanted to thank you for attending this webinar. So this is, again, Karen Cott, and then my name is Tricia Bartles. If you have any questions for me or Karen, please send an email my way. You can also catch me with the AGC number extension 702.
Or if you'd like to add anything to the chat right now, if you have any outstanding questions of anything we didn't cover or maybe something else, you can add that. We do have built into the schedule on the way back on the last day, we spend some time in Banff. And so we have kind of a free afternoon to spend in Banff. And one woman on my next trip scheduled a massage. We have some people who go up in the gondola and overlook the area. I've had people rent e-bikes or just go to all the little local shops in Banff. It's kind of a lovely opportunity to spend time in a place you've probably heard of or read about. And we had a short optional hike there also last year. And so there's just lots of opportunities on this trip.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'd like to open it up for questions now as well, or if you have questions later, feel free to email me, but please use that chat function and then we can go ahead and answer them.
And let me also say that on this trip, many of our domestic trips you have 2 AGC guides, and we do all of the driving, cooking, and hiking. In Canada, in the areas where you will be, you are required to have a licensed Canadian guide. And so we do have a local partner that we connect with. And so on this particular trip, there is an official licensed Canadian guide who knows all about the areas we'll be hiking, all about safety protocol, has information about all the weather and stuff like that. They're making decisions along the way as to the best way to navigate through the week. And it's really nice to have their perspective, eh? Our last guide kept saying "eh" and didn't even realize that it was, something all of our ears were perking up to and really enjoyed. But it's just lovely also having a local guide's perspective of the area, which is true on all of our international trips.
Mm-hmm. Do we get to see the Northern Lights?
In past trips, Karen, do you want to take this one?
We have not seen the Northern Lights on this particular trip before. There's always an opportunity, but it is not something I would count on. Lots of times you get a heads up if there's going to be Northern Lights. So if there will be some in the area, we'll know about it, and the guides will be able to direct your attention to it. But most likely, I wouldn't take a trip counting on the fact that you're going to see the Northern Lights while you're there.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. But thank you all again. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and we hope to see you at the next webinar or on another trip of ours. Take care.
Bye, everyone.